If you're enjoying this video, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell. Share it with your friends, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Every like and subscribe helps the channel grow. My name is John Erickson, and I've been a park ranger for almost 10 years now. Most people think it's a peaceful job, walking through forests, watching sunsets, and breathing in fresh air. And yeah, sometimes it is, but there are days when the forest feels different, like it's alive in a way that doesn't feel right. This is the story of one of those days. Actually, it's more than that. It's the day my life changed forever. It started like any other morning. I was assigned to check a section of the Green Mountain National Forest after a big storm had rolled through the night before. The locals called this part Hunger Mountain. I never liked that name. It sounded wrong, but I wasn't one to believe in ghost stories or legends. To me, it was just another mountain with trails to clear and trees to inspect. The drive to the trailhead was quiet, too quiet, actually. Normally, I'd see deer grazing by the roadside or hear birds chirping in the trees, but that morning, there was nothing. Just the sound of my truck's engine and the crunch of gravel under the tires. When I got out of the truck, I noticed how cold it was for early autumn. My breath fogged up in front of me as I grabbed my gear, a map, compass, flashlight, and my radio. The wind whistled softly through the trees, but there was something off about it. It wasn't just wind, it sounded like whispers, faint and distant, like someone was talking just out of earshot. I shook it off and started walking up the trail. The forest here was dense, tall pines and oaks that blocked out most of the sunlight. The ground was covered in wet leaves from last night's storm, and every step I took made a loud squish or crunch. It felt like I was disturbing something ancient, something that didn't want to be disturbed. About an hour into my hike, I stopped to take a break near a clearing. That's when I noticed something strange, a circle of trees with their bark stripped clean. The wood underneath was pale and smooth, almost like bone. It didn't make sense. There were no signs of animals or tools that could have done this. I ran my hand over one of the trees and felt a chill run down my spine. The bark wasn't just stripped. It looked like it had been eaten. But by what? Before I could think about it too much, a sharp crack echoed through the forest behind me. I spun around so fast I nearly dropped my flashlight. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding small against the towering trees. No answer. I waited for what felt like forever, my heart pounding in my chest. Then I heard it again, a crackling sound, like twigs snapping underfoot. Only this time it wasn't behind me. It was coming from deeper in the forest. I'm not ashamed to admit that I hesitated for a moment. Every instinct told me to turn back and head for my truck, but my job was to investigate strange things in these woods. So I tightened my grip on my flashlight and stepped off the trail. The deeper I went, the darker it got. The trees grew closer together here, their branches twisting overhead like clawed hands reaching for each other. The air smelled damp and sour, like rotting leaves mixed with something metallic. That's when I saw it. The mist. It crept along the ground like a living thing, curling around tree trunks and spreading out in all directions. At first, I thought it was just fog from last night's storm, but then I noticed its color. A sickly yellowish green that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. The whispers came back then. Louder this time, but still impossible to understand. They weren't coming from any one direction, they were everywhere at once. "Who's there?" I shouted into the mist. No answer again. But then, movement. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw something shift between two trees, a shadow too big to be an animal but too fast to be human. My stomach dropped as every hair on my body stood on end. "Hello?" My voice cracked this time as fear started creeping in. Still nothing. I took another step forward and froze when I saw what lay ahead, an old campsite abandoned in a hurry. A tent torn to shreds with its poles bent at odd angles, a backpack lying open with its contents scattered across the ground, and next to it footprints. They weren't human footprints. They were massive and clawed, pressed deep into the muddy earth. like whatever made them weighed hundreds of pounds. That's when I realized I wasn't alone out here. I stood there for a long moment staring at those footprints. They were huge, at least twice the size of my own boot, and the claws dug deep into the mud like whatever made them was in a hurry or angry. My gut told me to turn around and head back to the truck, but my legs wouldn't move. It was like I was frozen, stuck between curiosity and fear. I forced myself to take a deep breath. "It's probably just a bear," I muttered under my breath, trying to convince myself. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. I'd seen bear tracks before. These weren't bear tracks. The wind picked up again, rustling the shredded tent and scattering leaves across the clearing. That's when I noticed something else. There was no other sound. No birds, no insects, nothing. Just the wind and those faint whispers that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere all at once. I crouched down near the tent, my flashlight trembling slightly in my hand. The fabric was torn clean through, like it had been slashed by something sharp, not ripped or chewed. Slashed. The backpack nearby looked just as bad, its straps shredded and its contents scattered across the ground. A water bottle lay on its side, its plastic bent and cracked as if it had been crushed. I picked up a notebook that was half buried in the dirt. The pages were damp and smeared with mud, but I could still make out some of the writing. It looked like a journal. Someone had been keeping notes about their hike. The last entry sent a chill down my spine. "Kid, something is following us. We hear it at night, branches snapping, heavy footsteps. It's getting closer. Asterisk." I dropped the notebook like it burned me and stood up quickly, scanning the trees around me with my flashlight. My heart was pounding now, loud in my ears. The mist had thickened while I was distracted, curling around my boots like it was alive. "Okay," I whispered to myself, trying to stay calm. "You're fine. Just head back to the truck." But as soon as I turned around, I heard it again, that crackling sound of branches breaking underfoot. Only this time, it wasn't faint or distant. It was close. Too close. "Hello?" My voice came out shaky as I swung my flashlight toward the noise. The beam of light cut through the mist, illuminating nothing but trees and shadows. But then, movement again. A dark shape darted between two trunks so fast I barely caught it. "Who's there?" I called out louder this time. No answer. I took a step back toward the trailhead. My flashlight still pointed into the trees. My radio crackled suddenly at my hip, making me jump so hard I nearly dropped it. "John? You there?" It was Sarah from base camp. I fumbled with the radio for a second before pressing the button to respond. "Yeah," I said quickly, my voice shaking just enough for her to notice. "You okay? You sound off." "I'm fine," I lied. "Just found an abandoned campsite up here on Hunger Mountain. Looks like someone left in a hurry." There was a pause on her end before she spoke again. "Be careful up there, John. You know what they say about that place." I sighed heavily into the radio. "Not you too," I muttered. "I'm serious," she said firmly this time. "People go missing up there all the time. See, locals say there's something wrong with that mountain." "Yeah? Like what?" I asked sarcastically, trying to lighten the mood even though my hands were still shaking. She hesitated before answering. "They call it the Hunger. Some kind of spirit or creature that protects the forest, but not in a good way." I rolled my eyes even though she couldn't see me. "Sounds like campfire stories to me." "Maybe," she said quietly, "but just be careful anyway." Before I could respond, another loud crack echoed through the forest. This time so close it felt like it came from right behind me. "John? John?" Sarah's voice crackled through the radio again as I spun around with my flashlight. "I'll call you back," I said quickly, before shoving the radio into my pocket. Said beam of light swept over trees and mist until it landed on something that made my blood run cold. Claw marks carved deep into a tree trunk, just a few feet away from where I stood. They were fresh. Sap still oozed from the grooves, and they were big enough to match those footprints in the mud. I didn't wait any longer after that. Gripping my flashlight tightly, I started walking back toward the trailhead as fast as I could without breaking into a full sprint. See, the whispers grew louder with every step I took, almost like they were following me now, or maybe leading me somewhere else entirely. The mist seemed thicker too, wrapping around me like a blanket and making it harder to see more than a few feet ahead. Every now and then, I thought I saw shadows moving just beyond the edge of my light, a flicker here, a blur there, hole, but every time I turned to look directly at them, nothing. By the time I reached what should have been the trailhead, my chest was tight with panic, and that's when I realized something was very wrong. The trailhead wasn't there anymore. Instead of gravel and tire tracks leading back to my truck, all I saw was more forest stretching out endlessly in every direction. I stood there, staring at the endless stretch of trees, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst out of my chest. This didn't make sense. I'd been on this trail dozens of times before. The truck should have been right here, but now it was just gone. I turned in a slow circle, shining my flashlight in every direction. Trees, mist, shadows, nothing else. The trail I'd been following was gone too, swallowed up by the forest like it had never existed. "Okay, John," I whispered to myself, trying to stay calm. "You probably just got turned around. Take a deep breath and think." I pulled out my compass, hoping it would help me find my way back. But when I looked at it, my stomach dropped. The needle was spinning wildly, like it couldn't decide which way was north. "Great," I muttered under my breath. I tried the radio next, pulling it off my belt and pressing the button. "Sarah, can you hear me? I think I'm lost." Static. "Sarah? Anyone?" I tried again, but all I got was more static mixed with faint crackling sounds that almost sounded like breathing. I shoved the radio back into my pocket, my hands trembling now. The whispers were louder than ever, circling around me like invisible voices just out of reach. They weren't words, at least not any I could understand, but they felt wrong, like they didn't belong here. I took a shaky step forward, then another, trying to keep moving even though every instinct in my body screamed at me to stop. The forest felt alive now, watching me, waiting for something. The trees seemed closer than before, their twisted branches reaching out like they were trying to grab me. The mist grew thicker with every step I took, wrapping around me so tightly that I could barely see more than a few feet ahead. My flashlight beam bounced off the fog uselessly, lighting up nothing but shadows that seemed to shift and move on their own. And then, I heard it, a low growl. It wasn't loud, but it was deep, so deep that I felt it in my chest more than I heard it with my ears. It came from somewhere behind me, rumbling through the trees like thunder rolling in from a distance. I froze in place, every muscle in my body tensing up as I slowly turned around. "Hello?" My voice came out barely above a whisper. The growl came again, louder this time and closer. I pointed my flashlight toward the sound, my hand shaking so badly that the beam wobbled across the trees. At first, there was nothing but mist and shadows, but then something moved. It was just a flicker at first, a dark shape shifting between two trees, but as I stared harder, it started to take form. It was tall, taller than any person I'd ever seen. Its body was thin and twisted, almost like it had been stretched too far. Its skin, or whatever covered it, looked rough and uneven, like bark peeling off a dead tree. And its eyes glowed faintly in the dark, an eerie green light that cut through the mist like tiny lanterns. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt tight as I stood there frozen, staring at this thing that shouldn't exist. It didn't move right away. It just stood there between the trees, watching me with those glowing eyes. But then its head tilted slightly to one side, almost like it was curious about me. That's when I realized something else. The whispers had stopped. The silence was deafening now. No wind, no rustling leaves, no distant noises from animals or birds. Just me and this thing staring at each other in the middle of the forest. And then it moved. Not fast, not yet, but slow and deliberate as it stepped out from behind the trees and into the open space between us. Its legs were long and thin like tree branches, bending unnaturally with each step. Its arms hung low at its sides, ending in clawed fingers that looked sharp enough to tear through anything they touched. I took a step back without thinking, my boots crunching loudly on the wet leaves beneath me, and that's when it stopped moving. For a moment, neither of us moved or made a sound. It just stood there staring at me with those glowing eyes while I tried desperately to figure out what to do next. Run? Hide? Fight? None of those options seemed good, not against something like this. But then, it tilted its head again and smiled. At least I think it smiled. Its face didn't have lips or teeth exactly, just cracks that split open across its bark-like skin to reveal something dark and empty underneath. But somehow I knew it was smiling at me, and that's when I ran. I didn't think, I didn't plan, I just ran. My legs moved on their own, crashing through the underbrush as branches whipped at my face and arms. The mist was everywhere, making it hard to see where I was going, but I didn't care. All I knew was that I had to get away from that thing. Behind me, I heard it move. Not running. No, it wasn't in a hurry. Its footsteps were slow and heavy, like it knew I couldn't escape. Each step sounded like wood snapping under pressure, echoing through the forest in a steady rhythm. Snap, 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 snap. It was following me. I didn't dare look back. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode, and my breath came in short, panicked gasps. The forest seemed to close in around me, the trees growing thicker and darker with every step I took. My flashlight beam bounced wildly as I stumbled over roots and rocks, barely managing to stay on my feet. "Come on, John," I muttered to myself between breaths. "Keep moving. Don't stop." But no matter how fast I ran, the footsteps stayed close behind me, always the same distance away, never speeding up or slowing down. It was like it was toying with me, letting me think I had a chance when we both knew I didn't. I don't know how long I ran. Minutes? Hours? Time didn't feel real anymore. All I could focus on was putting one foot in front of the other and trying not to trip. Then out of nowhere, the ground disappeared beneath me. I fell hard, sliding down a steep slope covered in wet leaves and loose dirt. My flashlight flew out of my hand and tumbled ahead of me, its beam spinning wildly through the darkness before it landed somewhere below. I hit the bottom with a thud that knocked the wind out of me. For a moment, all I could do was lie there on my back, staring up at the misty sky as pain shot through my ribs and legs. But then I heard it again, the footsteps. They were at the top of the slope now, slow and deliberate as they crunched through the leaves above me. I scrambled to my feet, ignoring the sharp pain in my ankle as I grabbed my flashlight and limped forward into the trees. The slope had brought me into some kind of hollow, a low-lying area where the mist pooled thick and heavy like smoke. The air felt colder here, biting at my skin even through my jacket. The whispers started again, not faint this time, but loud and clear, circling around me like voices just out of reach. "John." I froze. That wasn't just any whisper, it was my name. "John." The voice came again, soft and echoing like it was being carried on the wind. It sounded familiar somehow, like someone I knew but couldn't quite place. My stomach twisted as an icy wave of fear washed over me. "Who's there?" I called out hoarsely, shining my flashlight into the mist. No answer. The footsteps had stopped now too. Everything was silent, except for those whispers calling my name over and over again. And then, I saw her. At first I thought it was just another shadow in the mist, but as she stepped closer, her shape became clearer. It was a woman with long dark hair wearing a simple dress that fluttered softly in the breeze. Her face was pale and blurred by the fog, but there was something about her that made my chest tighten painfully. "Emily?" I whispered, without thinking. It couldn't be her. It shouldn't be her, but somehow, it was. My wife. The woman I'd lost 2 years ago in a car accident that had shattered my world. She didn't answer, just stood there staring at me with sad eyes that seemed to glow faintly in the dark like tiny embers. "Emily?" I said again, louder this time as tears stung my eyes. "Is it really you?" She tilted her head slightly. just like that thing had done earlier, and smiled softly before turning away and walking deeper into the mist. "Wait," I shouted, stumbling after her, despite every instinct screaming at me to stop. My mind was spinning now, confusion and fear battling against hope as I followed her through the hollow. The whispers grew louder with every step until they were almost deafening. But they weren't just calling my name anymore, they were laughing too. A low, mocking sound that sent chills down my spine, and then she stopped. She stood perfectly still in front of a massive tree, a gnarled oak with twisted branches that stretched high into the sky like skeletal arms reaching for something unseen. Its bark was blackened and cracked like it had been burned long ago but never fully healed. Emily turned back toward me slowly, and that's when I saw them. Her eyes weren't glowing anymore. They were empty black pits that seemed to swallow all light around them. "John," she whispered one last time before her face twisted into something horrible, a grotesque grin that split her skin open like cracked porcelain, and she lunged at me with clawed hands outstretched. I stumbled backward as fast as I could, my flashlight shaking wildly in my hand. Emily, or whatever that thing pretending to be her was, kept coming. Her movements were jerky and unnatural, like a puppet being pulled by invisible strings. Her clawed hands reached out for me, her twisted grin growing wider with every step. "Stay back," I shouted, my voice cracking as I scrambled away. She didn't stop. I swung the flashlight at her, desperate to keep her away, but she didn't even flinch. The beam of light hit her face, and for a split second, I saw something horrible. Her skin wasn't skin anymore. It was cracked and rough like tree bark peeling away to reveal something dark and rotten underneath. "Emily," I screamed again, even though I knew it wasn't her. It couldn't be. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't human. She lunged at me again, faster this time, and I barely managed to dodge her claws. My ankle throbbed painfully from the fall earlier, but I forced myself to keep moving. I couldn't let her or it catch me. I turned and ran deeper into the hollow, not caring where I was going as long as it was away from her. The mist seemed thicker now, wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket. The whispers were louder too, laughing and mocking me as I stumbled through the darkness. "John," they called out again, but this time there were more voices, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all calling my name in that same eerie tone. I didn't stop running until I saw it, a faint light flickering through the trees ahead of me. It wasn't bright, but it was enough to give me hope. Maybe it was another hiker or a campsite, or even my truck somehow. I pushed myself toward the light as fast as my legs would carry me, ignoring the pain in my ankle and the burning in my chest. The whispers grew louder behind me, and I could hear footsteps now too, not just hers but others. Heavy and slow, like something big was moving through the forest. When I finally reached the light, I realized what it was. A fire tower. It stood tall and rusty in the middle of the hollow, its metal frame creaking softly in the wind. The light came from a lantern hanging near the base of the tower, swaying gently like someone had left it there recently. Without thinking twice, I grabbed onto the ladder and started climbing. My hand slipped on the cold metal rungs as my flashlight dangled from my belt, but I didn't stop. Every instinct told me to get higher, to put as much distance between me and whatever was chasing me as possible. The climb felt endless. My arms burned with effort as the ladder groaned under my weight, but eventually I reached the top. A small platform surrounded by railings with a locked door leading into the tower's cabin. I leaned against the railing for a moment to catch my breath, my chest heaving as sweat dripped down my face despite the cold air. Below me, the mist swirled thickly around the base of the tower like a living thing, and then I saw them. Shadows moved through the fog, dozens of them now, tall and thin like Emily had been, but different somehow. Their bodies twisted unnaturally as they walked toward the tower in slow motion, their glowing eyes piercing through the darkness. And then they stopped. Every single one of them stopped at once and looked up at me with those eerie green eyes that seemed to burn into my soul. I gripped the railing tightly, trying to steady myself as fear clawed at my chest. "What do you want?" I shouted down at them. No answer, just silence again. But then one of them stepped forward, the biggest one yet, and tilted its head just like Emily had done earlier before smiling that horrible grin. It raised one clawed hand toward me slowly, and suddenly all of them started climbing. I froze as I watched them climb. Their movements were slow but deliberate, their long, twisted limbs gripping the metal frame of the fire tower like it was nothing. The sound of their claws scraping against the ladder sent shivers down my spine. There had to be at least a dozen of them now, maybe more, all making their way toward me. I backed up to the far edge of the platform, my hands gripping the railing so tightly that my knuckles turned white. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might burst out of my chest. I couldn't outrun them anymore. I couldn't hide, and there was nowhere else to go. "Think, John," I whispered to myself, trying to stay calm even though panic was clawing at me from every direction. "You've got to do something." I looked around the platform desperately, searching for anything I could use as a weapon or a way out. The locked door leading into the cabin was useless. I didn't have the key, and there was no time to break it open. My flashlight was still clipped to my belt, but it wouldn't do much against whatever these things were. Then my eyes landed on the lantern hanging near the railing. It wasn't much, a small metal lantern with a flickering flame inside, but it was something. Fire. Maybe fire would work. I grabbed the lantern and held it tightly in both hands, the metal warm against my skin as I stared down at the creatures climbing toward me. They were closer now, almost halfway up, and I could see their faces more clearly, twisted and hollow, like tree bark peeling away to reveal something dark and rotten underneath. Their glowing green eyes never left me. "Stay back," I shouted, holding the lantern out in front of me like a shield. They didn't stop. The biggest one, the leader maybe, was almost at the top now. Its long arms reached for the edge of the platform as its head tilted again, that horrible grin splitting its face wide open. I didn't wait for it to pull itself up. With every ounce of strength I had left, I swung the lantern down toward its face. The glass shattered on impact, and flames erupted across its bark-like skin with a loud hiss. The creature let out an ear-piercing screech that made my ears ring as it flailed wildly, trying to put out the fire. Its claws scraped against the metal frame of the tower as it lost its grip and fell backward into the mist below. For a moment, everything stopped. The whispers went silent, and the other creatures froze in place as if they were stunned by what had just happened. But then, they started climbing again. I stumbled backward, my chest heaving as I tried to think of what to do next. The lantern was gone now, its flames had burned out, and there was nothing else on this platform that could save me. That's when I remembered something Sarah had said earlier about Hunger Mountain. Bull, some kind of spirit or creature that protects the forest, but not in a good way. Protects the forest. My eyes darted to my backpack lying on the ground near the railing, the one thing I hadn't used yet. Inside was a small bottle of lighter fluid I carried for emergencies. It wasn't much, but maybe it would be enough. I grabbed the backpack and ripped it open, pulling out the bottle with shaking hands as the creatures climbed closer. My fingers fumbled with the cap for a moment before I managed to twist it off and pour its contents onto the platform around me in a wide circle. The smell of chemicals filled the air as I reached for my flashlight again, the only thing I had left that could make a spark. The leader was back now, its glowing eyes staring at me from just below the edge of the platform as its clawed hands reached for me again. "Not this time," I muttered under my breath as I clicked on the flashlight and aimed it at the lighter fluid-soaked wood beneath my feet. The spark caught instantly. Flames roared to life around me in a bright orange ring that lit up the misty darkness like a beacon. The creatures screeched loudly as they recoiled from the fire, their twisted bodies writhing in pain as they tried to escape its heat. One by one, they fell back into the mist below, screaming and flailing until their glowing eyes disappeared completely into darkness. And then, silence. I stood there on the platform, surrounded by the flickering flames, my chest heaving as I tried to catch my breath. The mist below was still thick, swirling like smoke, but the creatures were gone. At least, I hoped they were. The forest was silent again. No whispers, no footsteps, no growls, just the crackling of fire and the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ear. I leaned against the railing for support, my legs shaking so badly I thought they might give out. My hands were trembling too, covered in soot and lighter fluid. I stared down at the bottle in my hand, the one thing that had saved me, and let out a shaky laugh. I couldn't believe it had worked, but I wasn't safe yet. The fire was spreading quickly now, climbing up the wooden frame of the tower and licking at the edges of the platform. The heat was intense, making sweat drip down my face as I backed away from the flames. If I didn't get out of here soon, I'd be trapped. I looked down at the ladder, the only way out, and felt my stomach twist. What if they were still down there? What if they were waiting for me in the mist? The thought made my skin crawl, but I didn't have a choice. Staying here wasn't an option. "Okay, John," I whispered to myself, trying to steady my nerves. "You've made it this far. You can do this." I grabbed my backpack and slung it over my shoulder before climbing over the railing and onto the ladder. The metal was hot to the touch, but I ignored it as I started making my way down as fast as I could without slipping. Every creak of the ladder made my heart jump, but I kept going, one rung at a time until my boots finally hit solid ground. The mist was still thick around me, curling through the trees like it was alive, but there was no sign of them. No glowing eyes, no twisted shadows. For a moment I thought I was safe, and then I heard it. A faint whisper carried on the wind, so soft I almost didn't notice it at first, but it was there. "John." My blood ran cold as every muscle in my body tensed up again. It wasn't loud or close like before, it sounded distant now, fading into the forest, but it was enough to remind me that this wasn't over. I didn't wait to find out what would happen next. I turned and ran toward where I thought the trailhead should be, ignoring the pain in my ankle and the burning in my lungs as I pushed through the mist. The forest seemed endless, trees stretching out in every direction like a maze, but eventually I saw something that made me stop dead in my tracks. My truck. It was right there in front of me, parked exactly where I'd left it earlier that morning. Relief flooded through me as I sprinted toward it and yanked open the door with trembling hands. I climbed inside and slammed the door shut behind me before fumbling with the keys in my pocket. The engine roared to life on the first try, a sound that felt like music to my ears, and I didn't waste any time putting it into gear and peeling out onto the gravel road. As I drove away from Hunger Mountain, I couldn't stop glancing at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see those glowing eyes staring back at me through the mist. But there was nothing there, just shadows and trees fading into darkness as I sped down the road. It took me hours to get back to base camp. Not because it was far, but because every turn on that road felt like it might lead me back into that cursed forest. When I finally pulled into camp, Sarah came running out to meet me. "John, what happened?" she asked, her eyes wide with concern as she saw how shaken up I looked. I climbed out of the truck slowly, my legs still feeling weak as I leaned against the door for support. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you," I said quietly. She frowned but didn't press me for details. Not yet, anyway. Instead, she helped me inside and sat me down with a cup of hot coffee while she called for medical help to check out my injuries. As they patched up my ankle and cleaned off some of the cuts on my arms and face, all I could think about was what had happened up there and what those things were. Part of me wanted to believe it had all been some kind of hallucination brought on by exhaustion or fear, but deep down I knew better. The forest had felt wrong from the start, and now I understood why. Days passed after that night on Hunger Mountain, but no matter how much time went by or how far away from that place I got, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching me. Sometimes at night, when everything is quiet, I hear whispers again. My name is Maria Cortez. I've spent most of my life in the Everglades, working as a park ranger. It's not an easy job, but it's one I love. There's something about the swamp, its stillness, its wildness, that feels like home to me. But let me tell you something. The Everglades aren't just a place of beauty, they can be dangerous too. And sometimes they feel alive. It was a warm, sticky night when it all began. The kind of night where the air clings to your skin and every breath feels heavy. I was out on patrol, alone as usual, gliding across the dark water in my airboat. The hum of the engine was the only sound, cutting through the thick fog that hung low over the swamp. I remember shining my flashlight across the water, scanning for anything unusual. It was quiet, too quiet. Normally you'd hear frogs croaking or insects buzzing, maybe even a gator splashing in the distance. But that night, nothing, just silence. I told myself it was probably nothing. Maybe the animals were just hiding from a predator or something. But deep down, I felt uneasy. It was like the swamp itself was holding its breath. As I steered deeper into the fog, I noticed something strange on one of the trees near the water's edge. I slowed the boat and leaned forward to get a better look. There were claw marks, deep ones, carved into the bark. They were fresh too, like whatever made them had been there recently. Probably just a gator, I muttered to myself, trying to shake off the chill creeping up my spine. But even as I said it, I knew those marks didn't look like any gator I'd ever seen. Then I heard it, a sound that made my blood run cold. It started as a low hum, almost like a vibration in my chest. At first, I thought it might be my engine acting up, but then it grew louder and louder until it turned into this awful wailing noise. It echoed through the swamp, bouncing off the trees and water like it was coming from everywhere. At once, I froze, gripping the controls of my boat so hard my knuckles turned white. My flashlight flickered for a moment before going out completely, leaving me in total darkness. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaky but loud enough to carry across the water. "Is someone out there?" No answer. The wailing stopped as suddenly as it had started, leaving me with nothing but silence again. But this time, it wasn't just silence. It was an emptiness that felt wrong, like something had sucked all the life out of the swamp. I tried to restart my flashlight, shaking it and smacking it against my palm until it finally flickered back on. That's when I saw them, ripples in the water, heading straight for my boat. The ripples were small at first, barely noticeable, but as I stared, they grew bigger, spreading out like something was moving fast under the water. My heart started pounding in my chest. I gripped the edge of the boat, my flashlight trembling in my hand. "Stay calm, Maria," I whispered to myself. It's probably just a gator, but deep down I knew it wasn't. Gators don't move like that, not in a straight line, not that fast. Whatever was under the water was heading right for me. I reached for the engine controls, trying to start the boat again. The engine sputtered and coughed, but wouldn't turn over. Come on," I muttered, twisting the key harder like that would somehow make it work. The ripples were getting closer now, almost underneath me. That's when I heard it again. He. It was softer this time, but it was there, vibrating through the air like a warning. My stomach twisted into knots as I looked around, shining my flashlight in every direction. The fog was so thick I couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. "Hello?" I called out again, my voice trembling but louder this time. "Is anyone there?" Still no answer. The ripples stopped suddenly, right next to my boat. The water went still again, like nothing had happened. But I didn't feel relieved, not even a little. If anything, the stillness made it worse. I leaned over the edge of the boat, shining my flashlight into the water. At first, all I saw was my own reflection, a pale face staring back at me with wide eyes. But then, something moved. It was quick, just a flash of movement deep below the surface. I couldn't make out what it was exactly, but it was bigger than any gator I'd ever seen. My breath caught in my throat as I watched it disappear into the darkness. I sat back quickly, gripping my flashlight like it was the only thing keeping me safe. My hands were shaking now, and no matter how hard I tried to steady them, they wouldn't stop. I needed to get out of there fast. I grabbed my radio and pressed the button to call for help. "This is Ranger Cortez," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm in Sector 7 near Blackwater Creek. My boat's dead and something's out here. Static." I pressed the button again and repeated myself. Louder this time. Ranger Cortez. Can anyone hear me? I need assistance. More static. The hum grew louder again, this time coming from somewhere behind me. Slowly I turned around and shined my flashlight into the fog. At first there was nothing, just trees and water and mist swirling in the air. But then I saw them, two glowing yellow eyes staring back at me from the darkness. Those eyes, they didn't blink. They just stared at me, glowing faintly in the fog like two tiny lanterns. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. My flashlight beam trembled as I tried to focus on whatever was watching me, but the fog was too thick to see anything else. Who's there? I called out, my voice cracking slightly. I wanted it to sound strong, but it didn't. It sounded scared because I was. The eyes didn't move. They just hovered there, unblinking, like they were studying me. My mind raced with possibilities. Maybe it was just an animal. A panther, maybe? But no, panthers don't have glowing eyes like that, and they don't hum. The hum was louder now, vibrating through the air and making my chest feel tight. It wasn't coming from the boat or the water, it was coming from from whatever those eyes belonged to. I slowly reached for the flare gun strapped to my belt. My fingers fumbled with the clasp as I kept my gaze locked on those glowing eyes. If this thing came any closer, I wasn't going down without a fight. But then, they disappeared. 1 second they were there, and the next they were gone, swallowed up by the fog. The hum stopped too, leaving me in complete silence again. I should have felt relieved, but instead my fear only deepened. Whatever it was still out there, and now I couldn't see it. I sat perfectly still in the boat, listening for any sound that might give away its location. The swamp seemed even quieter than before, like everything around me had gone into hiding. And then I heard a splash. It came from behind me this time, loud and close. I spun around so fast I nearly dropped my flashlight into the water. My beam landed on a cluster of mangroves, just a few feet away, their twisted roots reaching out of the water like skeletal hands. Something moved between them, something big. I couldn't see it clearly, but I could hear it. The sound of water sloshing and branches snapping as it pushed through the mangroves. Whatever it was circling me now, staying just out of sight. Stay calm, I whispered to myself, gripping the flare gun tightly in one hand and my flashlight in the other. You've got this. But did I? My boat was dead in the water, my radio wasn't working, and I had no idea what I was dealing with. For all I knew, this thing could tip me over and drag me under before I even had a chance to react. Another splash, this time closer. I turned again, shining my flashlight wildly across the water. The beam caught something, a flash of scales glinting in the light before disappearing beneath the surface. Scales? That didn't make sense. It wasn't a gator. I knew that much. Gators don't glow, they don't hum, and they definitely don't play games like this. The splashes stopped again, and for a moment everything went still, too still. And then, bang, something slammed into the side of my boat so hard it nearly knocked me overboard. I screamed and grabbed onto the edge to steady myself as the boat rocked violently back and forth. Enough, I shouted, raising the flare gun and firing it into the air without thinking. The flare shot up into the sky, lighting up the swamp in a bright red glow for just a few seconds. But those few seconds were enough to see it, to see it. It was massive, easily twice the size of any gator I'd ever seen. Its body was long and sleek, covered in shimmering black scales that reflected the red light like oil on water. Its head was shaped like a snake's, but with jagged teeth that jutted out at odd angles, too sharp and too many for its mouth to hold properly. And its eyes, those glowing yellow eyes, were locked on me again as it hovered just below the surface of the water. The flare fizzled out, plunging everything back into darkness, except for those haunting yellow eyes staring up at me. I couldn't breathe. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the flare gun. Those yellow eyes stayed fixed on me, glowing faintly in the dark water. I didn't know what this thing was, but I knew one thing for sure: it wasn't going to let me leave. Think, Maria. Think, I whispered to myself, trying to stay calm. But how could I? My boat was dead, my radio wasn't working, and now I was face to face with something that shouldn't exist. The hum started again, low and steady, vibrating through the air like it was coming from inside my chest. It made me feel sick, like my stomach was twisting into knots. The creature began circling the boat slowly, its massive body causing ripples that rocked me back and forth. I had to get out of there. Staying still wasn't an option anymore. I grabbed the engine controls again and twisted the key hard. The engine sputtered and coughed, but this time it roared to life. Relief flooded through me for a split second, until the creature slammed into the boat again. The impact was so strong it knocked me sideways, sending my flashlight skidding across the deck. The beam flickered wildly as it rolled toward the edge of the boat. I lunged for it just in time, grabbing it before it fell into the water. "Not today," I muttered under my breath, gripping the flashlight tightly as I steadied myself. The creature circled faster now, creating whirlpools that pulled at the boat like invisible hands trying to drag me under. I pushed the throttle forward, steering blindly through the fog and praying I could outrun whatever this thing was. The hum grew louder as I sped through the swamp, dodging low-hanging branches and twisted roots that seemed to reach out for me. The fog made it nearly impossible to see where I was going, but I didn't care. I just needed to get away. But it didn't stop chasing me. I could hear it behind me, the sound of water splashing and trees snapping as it followed close behind. Every time I glanced over my shoulder, those glowing yellow eyes were there, cutting through the darkness like tiny headlights. "Leave me alone," I shouted, my voice cracking with fear and frustration. The creature didn't listen. It lunged forward again, slamming into the back of my boat so hard that I nearly lost control of the steering wheel. The engine sputtered for a moment before roaring back to life, pushing me forward faster than ever. I spotted a narrow channel up ahead, a place where the trees grew so close together their roots formed a natural barrier on either side. If I could make it through there, maybe, just maybe, I could lose this thing. I steered toward the channel, gripping the wheel tightly as branches scraped against the sides of my boat. The creature was still behind me. I could feel its presence even though I couldn't see it anymore. As soon as I entered the channel, everything changed. The hum stopped suddenly, replaced by an eerie silence that made my skin crawl. The water grew still again, too still, and for a moment I thought maybe I'd lost it, but then, bang, something slammed into the side of my boat again, harder this time, and sent me flying across the deck. My flashlight slipped out of my hand and skidded away into the darkness. I scrambled to my feet, grabbing onto anything I could to steady myself as the boat rocked violently back and forth. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might burst out of my chest. And then, everything went quiet again. I stood there, frozen, gripping the edge of the boat as tightly as I could. The silence was deafening, like the swamp itself had stopped breathing. My flashlight was gone, leaving me in near total darkness. All I could see were faint outlines of twisted trees and the murky water stretching out around me. "Where are you?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. My hands felt clammy, and my legs were shaking so badly I thought I might collapse. The boat drifted slowly through the narrow channel, the engine humming softly now that I'd eased off the throttle. I didn't dare make too much noise. Whatever this thing was, it was still out there. I could feel it. I scanned the water around me, squinting into the fog to see if those glowing yellow eyes would appear again, but there was nothing. No ripples, no hum, just stillness. And then, a sound. It wasn't loud, but it was close. A soft splash, followed by the faint creak of branches shifting in the windless air. My heart jumped into my throat as I turned toward the noise, my eyes darting back and forth to find its source. "Hello?" I called out again, even though I knew no one would answer. My voice sounded small and scared in the vast emptiness of the swamp. The splash came again, closer this time. It sounded deliberate, like something was testing me, waiting for me to make a move. I reached for my flare gun again, gripping it tightly in both hands as I pointed it toward the water. My fingers hovered over the trigger, ready to fire at the first sign of movement, and then I saw it. At first, it was just a shadow, a dark shape gliding silently beneath the surface of the water, but as it got closer, its outline became clearer, long and sleek, with jagged edges that didn't belong to any animal I'd ever seen. I held my breath as the shadow stopped directly beneath my boat. The water rippled slightly around it, but it didn't rise to the surface. It just stayed there, waiting. "Come on," I whispered under my breath, tightening my grip on the flare gun. "Show yourself." For a moment, nothing happened. The shadow stayed still beneath me, and I started to wonder if maybe it had disappeared again. But then, crack. The boat lurched violently as something slammed into its underside. The impact sent me sprawling onto the deck, my flare gun skidding out of reach. Pain shot through my shoulder as I landed hard against the metal floor. I scrambled to get up, ignoring the throbbing in my arm as I reached for the flare gun. But before I could grab it, another crack. Shook the boat, this time harder than before. The shadow beneath me moved again, circling slowly like a predator stalking its prey. The hum returned too, low and steady at first, but growing louder with each passing second. I clutched onto the edge of the boat for dear life as it rocked back and forth under the force of whatever was attacking me. My mind raced with panic. What did this thing want? Why was it playing with me instead of finishing me off? And then, everything stopped again. The hum faded away into silence once more, and the shadow disappeared beneath the surface of the water. The boat settled back into stillness, leaving me alone in the fog once more. But this time, I wasn't alone. Slowly I turned toward a sound coming from behind me, the soft creak of wood bending under pressure. My eyes widened in horror as I saw it, a massive clawed hand gripping onto the side of my boat. The claw was massive, bigger than anything I'd ever seen. Its black, scaly skin glistened in the faint light, and its long, jagged nails dug into the side of my boat with a sickening screech. My breath hitched as I stared at it, frozen in place. I wanted to run, to jump into the water and swim as far away as I could, but my body wouldn't move. My mind screamed at me to do something, anything, but all I could do was watch as the claw tightened its grip. Then, slowly it began to pull itself up. The boat tilted slightly under the weight of whatever was climbing aboard. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. I scrambled backward on my hands and knees, desperate to put as much distance between me and it as possible. First came its head. It rose out of the water like a nightmare brought to life. Its face was long and narrow, like a snake's, but twisted in ways that didn't make sense. Its yellow eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, locking onto mine with an intensity that made my skin crawl. Water dripped from its jagged teeth as it opened its mouth slightly, letting out a low growl that sent shivers down my spine. The rest of its body followed, long and sleek, covered in those same shimmering black scales. It moved with an unnatural grace, like it wasn't bound by the same rules as everything else in the swamp. Every inch of it radiated power and malice. I finally found my voice, or what was left of it. "Stay back," I shouted, though it came out more like a desperate plea than a command. The creature didn't listen. It climbed fully onto the boat now, its massive frame making the whole thing tilt dangerously to one side. I grabbed onto the edge to keep from sliding into the water, my eyes never leaving the creature's face. It stared at me for what felt like an eternity, its glowing eyes unblinking. The hum returned again, louder this time, so loud it felt like it was inside my head. My vision blurred for a moment as the sound grew sharper, almost like a scream. I reached for my flare gun without thinking, my fingers fumbling over the cold metal as I raised it toward the creature. I said, "Stay back." I yelled again, this time with more force. The creature tilted its head slightly, almost like it was curious about me. Then it lunged. I fired. The flare shot out of the gun with a loud pop, hitting the creature square in the chest. For a moment, everything lit up in bright red light. The The creature let out an ear-piercing screech that made my ears ring as it reared back, its massive body thrashing wildly. The boat rocked violently under the force of its movements, and I clung to the edge for dear life. The flare had done something. It had hurt it, but not enough to stop it. The creature turned its glowing eyes back on me, now filled with rage. It let out another deafening screech before diving back into the water with a splash so powerful it nearly capsized the boat. I sat there for a moment, gasping for air and clutching the flare gun tightly in my hands. My whole body was shaking uncontrollably. The hum was gone again, replaced by an eerie silence that made my skin crawl. But I knew better than to think it was over. The water around me rippled again, small at first, but growing larger with each passing second. The creature wasn't done with me yet. I grabbed hold of the engine controls and twisted the key with all my strength. The engine sputtered once, twice, and then roared to life. "Come on," I muttered under my breath as I pushed the throttle forward. "Let's go." The boat lurched forward through the fog, picking up speed as I steered blindly through the narrow channel. My hands were slick with sweat as I gripped the wheel tightly, glancing over my shoulder every few seconds to see if it was following me. And then I saw them again, those glowing yellow eyes cutting through the darkness like tiny beacons of terror. The yellow eyes were back, and this time they weren't just watching, they were moving, fast. I could see the ripples in the water trailing behind them, cutting through the fog like an arrow aimed straight at me. "Go, go, go," I shouted to myself, pushing the throttle as far forward as it would go. The boat surged ahead, its engine roaring loudly in the stillness of the swamp. My hands gripped the wheel so tightly it felt like my fingers might snap. The creature was right behind me now. I didn't need to look back to know it was there. I could feel it, hear it, sense it in every fiber of my being. The hum had returned too, louder than ever, vibrating through the air and making my chest feel tight. I swerved hard to the left, dodging a cluster of mangroves that seemed to appear out of nowhere. The boat scraped against one of the roots, sending a jolt through my body, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. The creature followed effortlessly, its massive body gliding through the water like it owned the swamp. Every time I thought I'd gained some distance, those glowing eyes would appear again, closer than before. "Come on," I screamed at the boat, as if yelling at it would somehow make it go faster. The engine sputtered for a moment, and my heart nearly stopped. But then it roared back to life, pushing me forward again. I spotted a clearing up ahead, a place where the water opened up into a wide expanse surrounded by tall cypress trees. If I could make it there, maybe I'd have enough room to maneuver and figure out how to lose this thing. The boat burst into the clearing with a loud splash, and for a moment I thought I'd made it. The fog was thinner here, and I could see more clearly now, the twisted trees lining the edges of the water, their roots reaching out like claws, the faint glow of moonlight filtering through the mist. But then, boom, something slammed into the back of my boat so hard that I nearly flew out of my seat. The impact sent me sprawling onto the deck again, my flare gun skidding out of reach for the second time. I scrambled to my feet as fast as I could, grabbing onto anything to steady myself as the boat rocked violently back and forth. My eyes darted around wildly, searching for those yellow eyes, but they were gone again. The hum grew louder, so loud now that it felt like it was inside my head. My vision blurred slightly as I stumbled toward the edge of the boat, clutching onto the railing to keep from falling overboard. And then, it rose. The creature burst out of the water with a deafening screech that made my ears ring. Its massive body towered over me now, shimmering in the faint moonlight like something out of a nightmare. Water dripped from its jagged teeth as it opened its mouth wide, too wide, and let out another ear-piercing roar. I grabbed for my flare gun desperately, but it was too far away. My hands fumbled over the deck as I tried to find anything I could use as a weapon. My fingers closed around a metal pole, the handle of an old fishing net that had been left on board by one of the other rangers. It wasn't much, but it was all I had. "Stay back," I shouted again, holding the pole out in front of me like some kind of shield. The creature tilted its head slightly, almost like it was mocking me. Then it lunged forward with lightning speed. I swung the pole as hard as I could, hitting it square in the face. The impact made a sickening crunching sound that echoed through the swamp. The creature reared back with another screech, its glowing eyes narrowing in anger. But it didn't retreat. It lunged again, faster this time, and knocked me flat onto my back. Pain shot through my shoulder as I hit the deck hard, gasping for air as its massive claw came down toward me. I rolled to the side just in time. The creature's massive claw slammed into the deck where I'd been lying, splintering the wood with a loud crack. My chest was heaving, my heart racing so fast it felt like it might burst. I scrambled to my feet, gripping the metal pole tightly in both hands. The creature turned its glowing yellow eyes on me again, and for a moment we just stared at each other. It was sizing me up, waiting for me to make a move. Its body shifted slightly, its long tail swishing through the water like a whip. I didn't wait for it to attack again. I swung the pole as hard as I could, aiming for its head. The metal connected with a dull thud, and the creature let out a guttural growl that sent shivers down my spine. But it barely flinched. Instead, it lunged forward, its jaws snapping inches from my face. I stumbled backward, nearly losing my balance as I swung the pole again, this time hitting it in the side. The creature hissed in anger, its massive body twisting as it tried to knock me off my feet. The boat rocked violently under its weight, tilting dangerously to one side. Water sloshed over the edges, soaking my boots and making the deck slippery. I grabbed onto the railing with one hand to steady myself, still clutching the pole in the other. "Get back," I shouted, though my voice was shaky and filled with fear. "Stay away from me." The creature didn't listen. It lunged again, its claws swiping through the air and narrowly missing my arm. I swung the pole wildly, trying to keep it at bay, but I knew I couldn't keep this up forever. My eyes darted around the boat, searching for anything else I could use, anything stronger than this flimsy piece of metal. That's when I saw it. The flare gun. It was lying on the deck near the edge of the boat, just out of reach. My heart sank as I realized how far I'd have to go to grab it and how exposed I'd be if the creature attacked again. But I didn't have a choice. Taking a deep breath, I made a run for it. The boat tilted under my weight as I sprinted across the deck, slipping slightly on the wet wood. The creature roared behind me, its claws scraping against the railing as it tried to grab me. I dove for the flare gun, just as its massive tail whipped across the deck, knocking over everything in its path. My fingers closed around the handle of the gun and I rolled onto my back just in time to see the creature towering over me again. Its glowing eyes burned into mine as it opened its mouth wide, revealing rows of jagged teeth that gleamed in the faint moonlight. The hum was deafening now, vibrating through my entire body and making it hard to think. But I didn't need to think. I just needed to act. I raised the flare gun and fired. The flare shot out with a loud pop, hitting the creature square in the chest. For a moment, everything lit up in bright red light. The creature let out an ear-piercing screech that made my ears ring as it reared back, thrashing wildly. The boat rocked violently under its movements, nearly throwing me overboard. I clung to the edge with one hand while still holding onto the flare gun with the other. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might explode. The creature thrashed one last time before diving back into the water with a massive splash. The red glow faded quickly, plunging everything back into darkness, except for those faint ripples spreading out across the surface of the water. I sat there for a moment, gasping for air and clutching onto the flare gun like it was my lifeline. My whole body was shaking uncontrollably, and my mind raced with questions. What was that thing? Why was it here? And most importantly, was it gone? The swamp was silent again, eerily silent. No hum, no splashes, nothing but my own ragged breathing and the faint creak of wood beneath me. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. I sat there, gripping the flare gun so tightly my knuckles turned white. My chest heaved as I tried to catch my breath, my ears straining to hear anything that might tell me where it had gone. But the swamp was silent again, that unnatural kind of silence that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. The water around the boat was still, except for the faint ripples left behind from where the creature had disappeared. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, but I forced myself to stay as quiet as possible. I didn't want to make a sound, didn't want to give it any reason to come back. "Okay, Maria," I whispered to myself, my voice barely audible. "You're alive. You've got this." But did I? My boat was damaged, tilting slightly to one side, and I had no idea how much longer it would stay afloat. The engine was still running, though it sputtered every now and then like it might give out at any moment. And worst of all, I didn't know if the creature was gone for good or if it was just waiting for the right moment to strike again. I glanced around the boat, trying to assess what I had left. The flare gun was still in my hand, but I only had one flare left. My flashlight was gone, knocked overboard during the chaos, and most of the supplies on board had been scattered or damaged. I needed a plan. First things first, I had to get out of this clearing. It was too open, too exposed. If that thing came back, there'd be nowhere for me to hide. My best bet was to head for one of the narrow channels where the trees were thicker. Maybe I could lose it there, or at least buy myself some time. I reached for the throttle and eased it forward slowly, trying not to make too much noise as the boat started moving again. The engine sputtered but held on, and I steered toward the nearest cluster of trees. The fog was still thick, swirling around me like a living thing. Every shadow looked like it could be hiding something, and every sound, no matter how small, made my heart skip a beat. A branch creaked somewhere in the distance, and I flinched, gripping the wheel tighter. "Just keep moving," I muttered under my breath. "Don't stop." The hum hadn't returned yet, which gave me a small sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, it really was gone. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. That thing wasn't just an animal, it was something else entirely. Something smarter. Something worse. As I navigated through the narrow channel, my eyes darted back and forth across the water, searching for any sign of movement. The trees loomed overhead like silent sentinels, their twisted branches casting eerie shapes in the fog, and then there it was again. A ripple. It started small, barely noticeable at first, but as I watched, it grew larger, spreading out across the water like something big was moving just beneath the surface. My stomach twisted into knots as I gripped the throttle tighter, urging the boat forward faster. "Not again," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Please, not again." The ripple followed me now, keeping pace with the boat as I weaved through the channel. It stayed just far enough away that I couldn't see what was causing it, but close enough that I knew it wasn't going anywhere. The hum returned. It started softly at first, barely more than a vibration in the air, but it grew louder with each passing second, filling my ears and making my chest feel tight all over again. My hands were slick with sweat as I tried to focus on steering, but my mind was racing with panic. "Come on," I muttered through gritted teeth. "Just let me go." But whatever this thing was, it wasn't letting me go. The hum was everywhere now, vibrating through the air, the water, even my chest. It was so loud I could barely think. My hands shook as I gripped the wheel, steering the boat through the narrow channel as fast as it would go. The ripple wasn't just following me anymore, it was gaining on me. I glanced over my shoulder, and my stomach dropped. The yellow eyes were back, glowing faintly just beneath the surface of the water. They were closer now, too close. I couldn't outrun it. I had to do something, anything, to stop it. My mind raced as I scanned the boat for options. The flare gun was still in my hand, but I only had one shot left. Would it even work? The last flare had hurt it, but not enough to stop it completely. And if I missed, well, I didn't want to think about that. The boat lurched suddenly as the creature slammed into its side again. I stumbled forward, nearly losing my grip on the wheel. Water sloshed over the edges of the boat, soaking my legs and making the deck even more slippery. "Enough," I shouted, my voice cracking with fear and frustration. "What do you want from me?" Of course there was no answer. Just another hard slam that sent me sprawling onto the deck. My head hit the metal floor with a dull thud, and for a moment everything went blurry. Pain shot through my skull as I struggled to sit up, clutching the flare gun tightly in one hand. The hum grew louder still, almost deafening now. I could feel it in my teeth, in my bones. It wasn't just a sound, it was like the creature was inside my head trying to break me down from the inside out. But I wasn't going to let it win. I forced myself to my feet, swaying slightly as the boat rocked beneath me. The yellow eyes were closer now, so close I could see their faint glow reflecting off the water's surface. The creature's massive shadow loomed just beneath them, circling like a shark waiting for its prey. "Come on," I muttered under my breath, raising the flare gun with trembling hands. "You want me? Come and get me." The creature seemed to hear me, or maybe it just sensed that I wasn't running anymore. Either way, it stopped circling and began rising slowly out of the water. First came its head, long and narrow like a snake's, with jagged teeth that gleamed in the faint moonlight. Then its massive body followed, covered in those same shimmering black scales that seemed almost otherworldly. Water dripped from its claws as it climbed onto the edge of the boat, tilting it dangerously to one side. I stumbled backward but held my ground, keeping the flare gun aimed squarely at its chest. My finger hovered over the trigger as I locked eyes with it, those glowing yellow eyes that seemed to pierce straight through me. "Not this time," I whispered. The creature lunged forward with a deafening roar, its jaws snapping inches from my face. Without thinking, I pulled the trigger. The flare shot out with a loud asterisk pop asterisk, hitting the creature dead center in its chest. The light was blinding, red and bright and burning hot, and for a moment everything seemed to freeze. Then came the scream. It wasn't like anything I'd ever heard before, high-pitched and guttural all at once, filled with pain and rage and something else, something almost human. The creature thrashed wildly, its massive body twisting and writhing as flames engulfed it. The boat rocked violently under its weight as it tried to retreat back into the water. But this time it didn't make it. With one final screech, the creature collapsed onto the deck, its glowing yellow eyes dimming until they went out completely. Smoke rose from its charred body as it lay still at last. I stood there for a moment, staring at it in disbelief. My whole body was trembling, not just from fear but from exhaustion too. It was over, wasn't it? The hum was gone now, completely gone. And for the first time all night the swamp felt quiet again. Not eerie or unnatural, just quiet. I sank to my knees on the deck, clutching what was left of the flare gun in one hand and wiping tears from my face with the other. My chest heaved as I tried to catch my breath, relief washing over me like a tidal wave. But even as I sat there in silence, something didn't feel right. The water around me began to ripple again, small at first, but growing larger by the second. And then I heard it. A low hum, faint but unmistakable, coming from somewhere deep below. The hum, that same gut-wrenching hum. My body froze as the sound crept back into the air. Faint at first, like a whisper carried on the wind, but it was there. It was unmistakable. I stared at the creature's lifeless body sprawled across the deck, smoke still rising from its charred scales. It wasn't moving. There was no way it could be alive. I had seen it die. I had felt it die. But the hum wasn't coming from it. Slowly I turned my gaze to the water. The ripples were back, spreading out in perfect circles across the surface. They were bigger this time, more deliberate, as if something massive was moving just beneath me. "No," I whispered, shaking my head in disbelief. "No, no, no. This can't be happening." But it was happening. The boat rocked slightly as the ripples grew closer, and my stomach twisted into knots. My flare gun was useless now, empty and battered from the fight. I had nothing left to defend myself with, and my body was too exhausted to run. I thought about jumping into the water, but where would I go? The swamp stretched out endlessly in every direction, and whatever was coming for me would catch me in seconds. I was trapped. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the air and making my teeth chatter. I clutched onto the edge of the boat to steady myself as I scanned the water desperately for any sign of what was coming. And then, I saw them. Not one pair of yellow eyes this time, but 2, 3, asterisk, 4, asterisk. They glowed faintly in the fog, circling me like predators closing in on their prey. My chest tightened as panic set in, my mind racing with thoughts of how to survive this, if survival was even possible anymore. "Please," I whispered under my breath, though I wasn't sure who or what I was begging. "Please don't let this be real." The first set of eyes rose out of the water slowly, followed by a second creature that looked almost identical to the one lying dead on my boat. Its scales shimmered faintly in the moonlight as it let out a low growl that sent shivers down my spine. The others followed quickly after, their massive bodies breaking through the surface one by one until they surrounded me completely. Each one was just as terrifying as the last, long and sleek with jagged teeth and glowing eyes that seemed to burn with anger. I backed away slowly, my hands trembling as I tried to put some distance between myself and them. But there was nowhere to go. The boat was small, and they were everywhere. The hum reached a deafening pitch now, filling my ears and making it hard to think. My vision blurred slightly as tears welled up in my eyes, not just from fear but from frustration too. I had fought so hard to survive this night, only for it to end like this. "No," I muttered through gritted teeth, shaking my head again. "I'm not giving up." I glanced around the boat desperately, searching for anything that might help me fight back. My eyes landed on a small red canister tucked under one of the seats, a gas can for refueling the engine. An idea sparked in my mind, a dangerous, reckless idea, but it was all I had left. I lunged for the canister just as one of the creatures climbed onto the side of the boat. Its claws scraped against the metal with a horrible screech as it pulled itself up, its glowing eyes locked onto mine. "Come on," I muttered under my breath as I unscrewed the cap on the gas canister with shaky hands. "Come on." The creature lunged toward me just as I tipped the canister over, spilling gasoline across the deck and onto its massive body. It let out a guttural growl as it reared back slightly, its claws swiping at me but missing by inches. I grabbed a matchbook from my pocket, a habit I'd picked up from lighting campfires during patrols, and struck one against the side of the box with trembling fingers. The flame flickered weakly at first but held steady long enough for me to toss it onto the gas-soaked deck. The explosion wasn't huge. It wasn't like something out of a movie, but it was enough. Flames erupted across the boat instantly, engulfing everything in their path, including the creature closest to me. It let out an ear-piercing screech as it thrashed wildly, its massive body twisting and writhing before collapsing into the water with a loud splash. The other creatures roared in unison, an awful sound that made my blood run cold, but they didn't retreat. If anything, they seemed angrier now. The fire spread quickly across the deck, forcing me back toward the edge of the boat. Smoke filled my lungs as I coughed violently, my vision blurring even more as tears streamed down my face. I didn't have much time left. The flames would consume everything soon enough, but at least now I had a chance to escape. Without thinking twice, I dove into the water. The water was cold, colder than I expected, and it hit me like a shock to my system. My arms and legs moved instinctively, pushing me away from the burning boat as fast as I could. The flames lit up the swamp behind me, casting eerie shadows across the foggy water. I didn't dare look back. I didn't want to see if those creatures were following me. All I could do was swim and pray that I'd make it out alive. The hum was still there, faint but persistent, vibrating through the water now instead of the air. It made my chest feel tight and my head feel heavy, but I forced myself to keep going. "Don't stop," I whispered to myself between gasps for air. "Just keep moving." The swamp felt endless, like I was swimming in circles with no way out. My arms and legs burned from exhaustion, and every breath felt harder than the last. But then, I saw it. A light. It was faint at first, just a small glow in the distance, but it was there. My heart leapt as I realized what it was. The ranger station. Somehow, I'd made it back to familiar territory. I pushed myself harder, ignoring the pain in my muscles as I swam toward the light. The hum grew louder again, but I didn't care anymore. I wasn't going to stop, not when safety was so close. The water began to shallow as I reached the edge of the swamp, my feet brushing against muddy ground beneath me. I stumbled forward, pulling myself onto solid land with trembling arms. I collapsed onto the dirt, gasping for air and coughing violently as my lungs tried to recover. My entire body ached, but relief washed over me like a wave. I was alive. Somehow, I was alive. The hum faded into silence again as I lay there, staring up at the night sky through the twisted branches of cypress trees. The flames from the boat were just a faint glow in the distance now, barely visible through the fog. But even as relief settled in, something didn't feel right. I sat up slowly, my eyes scanning the swamp for any sign of movement. The water was still again, eerily still, and there were no ripples this time. But then, I heard it. A splash. It wasn't loud, but it was close, too close. My heart sank as I turned toward the sound, my eyes wide with fear, and there they were. Those glowing yellow eyes staring back at me from just beneath the surface of the water. I scrambled to my feet, backing away slowly as panic set in all over again. My mind raced with thoughts of what to do next, how to escape this nightmare once and for all. But before I could act, they disappeared. The eyes sank beneath the water without a sound, leaving nothing but ripples behind. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, staring at the spot where they had been. My chest heaved as adrenaline coursed through my veins, but eventually, nothing happened. The swamp was silent again, eerily silent, but this time it felt different. The hum didn't return, and there were no more ripples or glowing eyes. It was over. Or at least, that's what I told myself, as I stumbled toward the ranger station in the distance. Days later, authorities combed through Blackwater Creek after receiving my report about what had happened that night. They found my burned-out boat and traces of gasoline on its deck, but no sign of any creatures or glowing eyes. They chalked it up to exhaustion and stress, a hallucination brought on by fear and fatigue after being stranded in dangerous conditions. But deep down, I knew better. The swamp wasn't just alive, it was watching, waiting, and sometimes it lets you go. My name is Tom Hawkins, and I've spent most of my life as a park ranger in Sequoia National Forest. If you've ever been there, you'd know it's one of the most beautiful places on Earth. The trees are so tall they seem to touch the sky, and when the sunlight filters through the leaves, it feels like you've stepped into another world. But beauty can be deceiving. I learned that the hard way. It was late October, 1967. The air was crisp, and the forest was unusually quiet. Too quiet. Normally you'd hear birds chirping or squirrels rustling in the underbrush, but that day, nothing. Just the sound of my boots crunching on the dirt path, and Max, my German shepherd, trotting beside me. Max was my partner out there, my only real family after my wife passed away a few years back. He was always alert, always protective, but even he seemed uneasy that day. I was doing my usual patrol, making sure hikers hadn't wandered off the trails or left trash behind. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, but something about it felt wrong. The shadows stretched longer than they should have, and the air felt heavy, like it was pressing down on me. As I walked deeper into the forest, I noticed something strange. A thick greenish mist started to roll in from nowhere. It wasn't fog. This was different. It clung to the ground like it had a mind of its own, swirling around my boots as I moved. Max stopped dead in his tracks and let out a low growl, his ears pinned back. "What is it, boy?" I asked, patting his head to calm him down, but he didn't relax. His eyes were fixed on something ahead of us, something I couldn't see. That's when I noticed it. The footprints. They were huge, at least twice the size of my own boots, and they didn't look human. The toes were long and clawed, and they sank deep into the soil like whatever made them was incredibly heavy. They led off the trail and disappeared into the mist. I should have turned back right then and there. Every instinct in my body told me to leave, to get out of those woods before it was too late. But curiosity got the better of me. Or maybe it was pride. I'd been a ranger for over 20 years. I thought I'd seen it all. "Let's check it out," I said to Max, though I wasn't sure if I was trying to convince him or myself. We followed the footprints for about 10 minutes until we came across something that made my stomach turn, a torn backpack lying in the middle of a clearing. It was stained with what looked like blood. I froze when I saw the backpack. It wasn't just the blood that bothered me, it was the way it was torn, like something had ripped it apart with claws. Max sniffed around it, his tail stiff and his ears perked. He didn't bark though, which was unusual for him. It was like he didn't want to make a sound. I crouched down and picked up the backpack carefully. It felt damp and there were scratch marks all over it. Inside, I found a few scattered items, a water bottle, a flashlight, and a crumpled map of the forest trails. Whoever owned this backpack had been out here recently, but where were they now? "Hello?" I called out into the trees, my voice echoing in the quiet. "Is anyone out there? Are you hurt?" Psst. Nothing. Just silence. Max let out another low growl and started pacing back and forth. His behavior was making me nervous. He was trained to stay calm in emergencies, but this time he looked scared. And if Max was scared, I knew I had every reason to be. I stood up and scanned the area, my hand instinctively resting on the handle of my flashlight strapped to my belt. The mist was getting thicker now, curling around the trees like it was alive. The sun had almost completely set, and the forest was growing darker by the second. "All right," I said to Max, trying to keep my voice steady. "Let's head back to the station and report this." But as soon as I turned around, I heard it, a sound that made my blood run cold. It started as a low rumble, like distant thunder, but then it grew louder and sharper. It sounded like a howl, but not like any animal I'd ever heard before. It was deep and guttural, almost human, but not quite. The kind of sound that makes you feel like you're being hunted. Max barked furiously now, his teeth bared. He faced the direction of the noise. I shone my flashlight into the mist, but it barely cut through the thick green haze. My heart was pounding in my chest as I tried to figure out what to do. "Stay close," I whispered to Max. And then I saw them, two glowing red eyes staring at me from deep within the mist. They didn't blink or move. They just stared, unblinking and cold. My breath caught in my throat as every muscle in my body froze. I couldn't see what those eyes belonged to, just their glow cutting through the darkness like tiny embers. But I knew one thing for sure. Whatever it wasn't friendly. The calm tension in the air broke when Max lunged forward with a fierce bark. "No," I shouted, grabbing his collar before he could run into the mist. He struggled against me for a moment before finally backing down. The eyes disappeared into the mist without a sound. I stood there for what felt like forever, gripping Max's collar tightly and staring into the empty space where those eyes had been. My mind raced with questions. What did I just see? Was it an animal? A person? Something else entirely? I didn't have answers, just fear. "We're leaving," I said firmly to Max as I turned back toward the trail we came from. But deep down, I knew something wasn't going to let us leave so easily. I moved quickly, my boots crunching against the dirt trail as I tugged Max along. My flashlight beam bounced with every step, barely cutting through the thickening mist. The forest felt different now, like it was alive and watching me. Every sound, every shadow made my skin crawl. Max stayed close to my side, his ears twitching at every little noise. His usual confidence was gone, replaced by a nervous energy that only made me more uneasy. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see those glowing red eyes again. But there was nothing, just trees and shadows. The trail felt longer than it should have, like it was stretching out beneath my feet. I'd walked this path 100 times before, but now it felt unfamiliar, almost like the forest itself was shifting around me. I tried to shake off the thought, It was ridiculous, but the feeling wouldn't go away. And then I heard it again. The howl. It came from somewhere behind us, low and guttural, like it was echoing through the trees. My heart jumped into my throat as I stopped dead in my tracks. Max growled softly, his body tense and ready to spring into action. I turned around slowly, shining my flashlight back down the trail. The mist swirled in the beam of light, thick and heavy, but there was nothing there. No eyes, no movement, just that awful silence again. "Keep moving," I muttered to myself, forcing my legs to take another step forward. "Don't stop." But the forest wasn't done with me yet. A branch snapped somewhere off to my left, loud and sharp, like someone had stepped on it. I whipped my flashlight toward the sound, but all I saw were trees and shadows. My pulse was racing now, every instinct in my body screaming at me to run. "Hello?" I called out again, though my voice cracked with fear this time. "If someone's out there, show yourself." No answer. Max barked suddenly, his deep voice echoing through the forest. He lunged toward the trees on our left, pulling hard against his leash. I struggled to hold him back as he snarled and barked at something I couldn't see. "Max, stop," it hissed, gripping his collar tightly. And then I saw it, a figure moving between the trees. It was quick, almost too quick for me to process. Just a flash of movement in the corner of my eye, a tall dark shape slipping silently through the mist. My flashlight caught a glimpse of something wrong. The shape wasn't human. It was too big, too hunched over, and its movements were unnatural, jerky and fast. I froze again, staring into the darkness where the figure had disappeared. My hands were shaking now, as I tightened my grip on Max's leash. "We need to go," I whispered to him, though it felt like I was saying it more for myself than for him. We started moving again, faster this time. My flashlight flickered once, then twice, before going out completely. "No," I muttered under my breath as I smacked it against my palm, trying to get it to work again. "Not now." The darkness closed in around us like a heavy blanket. The only light came from the faint glow of the moon filtering through the trees above us, and even that wasn't enough to make me feel safe. The howling started again, closer this time. I didn't wait to figure out what it was or where it was coming from. Gripping Max's leash tightly in one hand and fumbling for my backup flashlight with the other, I broke into a run down the trail. Max stayed right by my side, his ears pinned back and his tail low as we raced through the forest. But no matter how fast we ran or how far we went, that feeling never left me. We weren't alone out there. Something was following us. I don't know how long we ran. It felt like hours, but it was probably only minutes. My breath came in short, sharp gasps, and my legs burned with every step. Max stayed close, his leash taut as he kept pace with me. The mist seemed to thicken as we moved, swirling around us like it was trying to trap us, and then, just as suddenly as it started, the trail ended. I stopped so fast that Max nearly ran into me. We were standing in a small clearing surrounded by towering trees. The ground was uneven, covered in roots and rocks. I looked around frantically, trying to figure out where we were. This wasn't part of the trail. I knew every inch of this forest, and I'd never seen this clearing before. "Where are we?" I whispered to myself, my voice trembling. Max barked again, his body rigid as he stared into the mist ahead of us. I followed his gaze, and that's when I saw it. The eyes. They were back. Those glowing red eyes staring at us from the edge of the clearing, but this time they weren't alone. The mist seemed to pull back slightly, revealing the shape of something massive. It was hunched over, its long arms dangling almost to the ground. Its skin or fur was dark and matted, blending into the shadows around it. But its face was what froze me in place. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was something in between, twisted and wrong. Its mouth hung open slightly, revealing sharp teeth that glinted in the faint moonlight. And those eyes, those awful red eyes, they burned into me like fire. Max growled low in his throat, his fur bristling as he stepped forward protectively. I tightened my grip on his leash, my mind racing as I tried to figure out what to do. "Stay back," I said weakly, though I knew it wouldn't listen. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't afraid of me. The creature tilted its head slightly, almost like it was studying us. Then it moved, slowly at first, stepping into the clearing with an unnatural grace. Its movements were jerky but deliberate, like it was testing us. I fumbled for my backup flashlight and switched it on. The beam cut through the mist just enough to illuminate the creature's face fully, and that's when I realized how wrong everything was. Its skin seemed to ripple and shift under the light, almost like it wasn't solid. The edges of its body blurred slightly, like it wasn't entirely there. And its eyes, they didn't just glow, they seemed to pulse with an eerie light that made my stomach churn. Max barked furiously now, lunging toward the creature with all his strength. "No!" I shouted, pulling him back with all my might. The creature stopped moving and let out a sound, a low rumble that vibrated through the air and into my chest. It wasn't a growl or a howl, it was something else entirely, something unnatural. I raised my flashlight high and pointed it directly at the creature's face. For a moment, it flinched slightly, its head jerking back as if the light hurt it. But then it let out another rumble and started moving toward us again. Faster this time. Panic took over completely. I grabbed Max's collar and ran toward the opposite side of the clearing as fast as I could. The creature moved behind us, its heavy footsteps pounding against the ground like thunder. It wasn't running. It didn't need to. It was faster than me, even at a walk. "Come on," I shouted at Max as we dodged through the trees on the other side of the clearing. But no matter how fast we moved or how far we went, I could still hear those footsteps behind us. It was following us, and it wasn't going to stop until it caught up. I could hear it getting closer. The heavy thud of its footsteps, the snapping of branches under its weight, it was right behind us. My chest burned as I ran, my legs screaming for me to stop, but I couldn't. Stopping wasn't an option. Not now. Max was pulling hard against the leash, his instincts telling him to fight while mine screamed at me to run. "Stay with me, boy," I panted, my voice barely more than a whisper. "We're gonna get out of this." But deep down I wasn't sure if I believed that. The forest around us seemed to twist and shift as we ran. The trees looked wrong, too close together, their branches reaching out like claws. The mist was everywhere now, thick and suffocating, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. It felt like the forest itself was trying to trap us, to keep us from escaping. And then I saw it, a ravine up ahead. It wasn't wide, maybe 6 or 7 feet across, but it was deep. I couldn't see the bottom through the darkness and mist, but I didn't need to. One wrong step and we'd be done for. I skidded to a stop at the edge, my boots kicking up dirt and loose rocks that tumbled into the abyss below. Max barked furiously beside me, his body turned toward the creature that was still coming for us. I turned around slowly, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst out of my chest. The creature stepped into view, emerging from the mist like a nightmare come to life. It was even bigger up close, easily 8 feet tall, its hunched frame towering over me. Its glowing red eyes locked onto mine, unblinking and cold. It didn't make a sound as it moved closer. No growl, no snarl, just those heavy footsteps that echoed in my ears like a drumbeat. I knew I couldn't outrun it. Not anymore. My mind raced as I tried to come up with a plan. The ravine, maybe I could use it. If I could lure the creature close enough, maybe it would fall in. But how? How could I get it to follow me without getting myself killed? And then Max did something that broke my heart. He lunged forward, snapping his leash clean off in one powerful motion. Before I could stop him, he charged straight at the creature, barking and growling with everything he had. "Max, no," I screamed, reaching out for him. But he didn't stop. The creature hesitated for a moment, as Max closed the distance between them. It tilted its head again, almost like it was confused by his sudden bravery, and then it let out that awful rumbling sound, the one that made my chest vibrate, and swiped at Max with one massive clawed hand. Max dodged just in time, darting around the creature and barking furiously to keep its attention on him. He was buying me time. I knew that, but it didn't make it any easier to watch. "Come on," I muttered to myself as I looked around desperately for something, anything I could use. That's when my hand brushed against something cold and metallic in my pocket. My grandfather's old compass. It wasn't much, but it was all I had. An idea started forming in my mind. A desperate, reckless idea that might just work if I was lucky. I grabbed a rock from the ground and threw it toward the edge of the ravine as hard as I could. The sound echoed loudly through the forest, drawing the creature's attention for just a moment. "Over here," I shouted at the top of my lungs, waving my flashlight wildly to get its attention. The creature turned toward me slowly, its glowing eyes narrowing slightly as if it understood what I was trying to do. Max barked again from behind it, nipping at its heels to keep it moving toward me. "Come on," I muttered under my breath as I backed up toward the edge of the ravine, just a little closer. The creature took another step forward, then another, until it was right at the edge. This was it. I held up the compass in one hand and angled it toward the moonlight filtering through the trees above us. The polished metal caught the light perfectly, reflecting a bright beam directly into the creature's eyes. It let out an ear-piercing screech, a sound so loud and unnatural that it made my ears ring and stumbled backward slightly, its claws swiping blindly at the air. "Now," I shouted at Max. He darted back toward me just as the creature lost its footing and tumbled into the ravine with a deafening crash. For a moment, everything went still. The only sound was my own ragged breathing and Max's panting beside me. I collapsed onto my knees at the edge of the ravine, clutching Max tightly as tears streamed down my face. He licked my cheek softly, his tail wagging weakly as if to say we'd made it. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over yet. I sat there on the edge of the ravine, holding Max close, my chest heaving as I tried to catch my breath. The forest was quiet again, but it wasn't the peaceful kind of quiet I was used to. This silence felt heavy, like the trees were holding their breath, waiting for something else to happen. I shone my flashlight down into the ravine, but the mist was too thick to see anything below. There was no sound, no movement, just darkness. For a moment, I let myself believe it was over. That thing, whatever it was gone. But deep down I didn't feel safe. Not yet. Max whined softly and nudged my arm with his nose. He was tired, just like me, but his eyes still darted around nervously, his ears twitching at every little sound. He knew it wasn't over either. "We need to get out of here," I whispered to him, my voice shaky. I stood up slowly, my legs trembling beneath me. My whole body felt like it had been through a war, scratched up from branches, bruised from falling, and completely drained of energy. But we couldn't stay here, not in this place. I turned back toward the trail, or at least where I thought the trail should be, but everything looked different now. The trees seemed closer together than before, their twisted branches reaching out like they were trying to block my path. The mist clung to the ground like a living thing, swirling around my boots as I moved. Max stayed close to my side as we walked, his head low and his tail tucked between his legs. He didn't bark or growl anymore. He was just as scared as I was. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see those glowing red eyes again, but there was nothing behind us, just shadows and silence. After what felt like hours of walking in circles, I finally saw something familiar. The faint outline of the ranger station's radio tower rising above the trees in the distance. Relief washed over me like a wave. "We're almost there," I said softly to Max, though I wasn't sure if I was trying to reassure him or myself. The closer we got to the station, the more normal everything started to feel again. The mist began to thin out, and the trees didn't seem so menacing anymore. By the time we reached the clearing where the small wooden building stood, I almost felt safe. Almost. I unlocked the door with shaking hands and stepped inside, flipping on the lights. The warm glow flooded the room, chasing away some of the fear that had been clinging to me since this nightmare began. Max padded in behind me and collapsed onto his bed in the corner with a tidy. I locked the door behind us and leaned against it for a moment, letting out a long breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. We were safe now, or at least safer than we'd been out there. But as I sat down at my desk and reached for the radio to call for help, something stopped me. The window. I don't know why I looked at it. Maybe it was instinct or just paranoia. But when I did, my stomach dropped. There was a handprint on the glass. It wasn't mine. It was too big, too clawed, and it was fresh. The mist outside swirled around it like smoke before fading away completely. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't gone. It was still out there, and it knew where to find me. I stared at the handprint on the glass, my heart pounding in my chest. It was massive, long fingers with sharp claw-like tips, and it looked like it had been pressed against the window just moments ago. The mist outside had cleared, but the forest beyond the station felt darker than ever. Max lifted his head from his bed and let out a low growl. His ears were pinned back, and his eyes were fixed on the window. He could sense it too. Whatever that thing was, it hadn't left. It was still out there, watching us. I grabbed the radio on my desk and fumbled with the dial, trying to get a signal. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped it. "Come on," I muttered under my breath, twisting the knob back and forth. "Work." Finally, I heard static crackle through the speaker. I pressed the button and spoke into it, my voice trembling. "This is Ranger Hawkins at Station 3. I need immediate assistance. There's something in the forest, something dangerous." The static continued for a moment before a voice came through, calm and professional. "Ranger Hawkins, can you describe the situation? Over." I hesitated, unsure of how to explain what had happened without sounding completely insane. There's some kind of creature out here," I said finally. "It's not an animal, it's something else. It attacked me and my dog while we were on patrol." The voice on the other end paused before responding. "Understood, Ranger Hawkins. Stay inside and lock all doors and windows. Help is on the way." I set the radio down and leaned back in my chair, trying to calm myself. But even as I sat there in the safety of the station, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. My eyes drifted to a shelf on the wall where an old leather-bound book sat, a collection of local legends and folklore that had been passed down through generations of rangers. I'd never paid much attention to it before, but now I needed answers. I grabbed the book and flipped through its pages, scanning for anything that might explain what I'd seen. Most of it was stories about bears or mountain lions, nothing unusual. But then I found something that made my blood run cold. It was a story about an ancient spirit that was said to haunt these woods, a malevolent force tied to one of the oldest sequoia trees in the forest. According to legend, this spirit would awaken every 50 years when disturbed by humans, logging, construction, anything that disrupted its domain. The description matched what I'd seen: glowing red eyes, unnatural movements, a body that seemed to shift and ripple like smoke. The book called it The Watcher. I turned the page and read more about how the Watcher would lure people deeper into the forest by mimicking voices or creating illusions, changing trails, twisting paths until they were hopelessly lost. And once it had them, it wouldn't let them go. My stomach churned as I realized how close Max and I had come to being its next victims. I closed the book and looked at Max, who was still growling softly at the window. "It's real," I whispered to him. "That thing, it's real." But if the Watcher was tied to an ancient tree, why had it come after me? What had disturbed it? And then it hit me. The logging site. A few miles from where we'd been patrolling earlier that day, there was a new logging operation clearing trees for development. It had caused a lot of controversy with environmental groups who wanted to protect the forest's natural beauty. Could that have been what woke the Watcher? I didn't have time to think about it further, because Max suddenly jumped up from his bed and started barking furiously at the door. Something was outside, and this time, it wasn't going to wait for me to come to it. Max's barking was sharp and frantic. His body pressed against the door as if he was trying to keep something out. My heart was racing again, that same cold fear creeping back into my chest. I grabbed my flashlight and the rifle mounted on the wall, standard issue for rangers, though I'd never had to use it for anything more than scaring off a bear. "Max, back," I commanded, my voice firm but shaky. He hesitated for a moment, then stepped back, still growling low in his throat. His eyes never left the door. I stood there, gripping the rifle tightly, listening. At first, there was only silence. Then came the sound of something heavy moving outside. Slow, deliberate footsteps crunching through the gravel around the station. I swallowed hard and pointed the flashlight at the door, my finger hovering over the trigger of the rifle. "Who's out there?" I called out, though I already knew it wasn't a person. The footsteps stopped. For a moment, everything went completely still. Even Max stopped growling, his ears pinned back as he stared at the door. My breath caught in my throat as I waited for whatever was out there to make its next move. And then, it knocked. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on the wooden door. My blood turned to ice. The sound was too controlled, too human. But I knew better. Whatever was outside wasn't human. It was playing with me. "Go away," I shouted, my voice cracking slightly. "I'm armed." The knocking stopped. I stood there frozen, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear anything else. Max barked again, louder this time, and lunged toward the door as if he couldn't stand being separated from whatever was on the other side. And then it spoke. "Tom." The voice was soft and familiar, too familiar. It sounded like my wife's voice, my late wife's voice. "Tom, let me in." My hand started shaking so badly that I almost dropped the rifle. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of what I was hearing. It wasn't possible. It couldn't be her. She'd been gone for years. "Tom, please," the voice said again, this time with a hint of desperation. "It's so cold out here." Tears welled up in my eyes as memories of her flooded back, her smile, her laugh, the way she used to call my name when she needed help with something small and silly. For a split second, I almost believed it was her. But then Max barked again, sharp and angry, and snapped me out of it. "No," I whispered to myself, shaking my head. "You're not her." The thing outside must have realized its trick wasn't working because the voice changed. It became deeper, harsher, more guttural than human. "Let me in," it growled, slamming against the door so hard that it rattled on its hinges. I stumbled back, raising the rifle and aiming it at the door as Max barked furiously beside me. The thing slammed against the door again and again, each hit harder than the last. The wood started to splinter under the force. I knew it wouldn't hold much longer. Desperate, I looked around for something, anything that could help me stop this thing. My eyes landed on the compass sitting on the desk where I'd left it earlier. The polished metal glinted faintly in the light of my flashlight. The compass had worked before, blinding the creature when it chased us into the ravine. Maybe it could work again. I grabbed it and held it tightly in one hand while keeping the rifle steady in the other. "Come on," I muttered under my breath as another loud crash shook the door. Just a little longer, and then silence again. The banging stopped abruptly, leaving only Max's growls and my own ragged breathing to fill the air. For a moment, I thought maybe it had given up, that maybe we were safe after all. But then I heard it, the sound of glass shattering behind me. I spun around just in time to see those glowing red eyes staring at me through what used to be one of the station's windows. The creature pulled itself inside with unnatural speed and grace, its massive frame folding and twisting in ways that shouldn't have been possible. It stood there in front of me now, tall and menacing, its eyes burning like embers in its twisted face. This was it. There was no more running. "Stay back," I shouted as I raised both the rifle and compass toward it. But deep down, I wasn't sure if either would be enough to stop it this time. The creature stood there, its massive frame filling the small room, its head tilted slightly, those glowing red eyes locked on me. It didn't move right away, like it was waiting, studying me. I could feel the weight of its presence pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe. Max barked furiously, standing between me and the creature like he was ready to fight it himself. His bravery gave me a flicker of strength, but I knew this thing was far beyond anything we could handle. Still, I wasn't about to give up, not without a fight. "Stay back," I shouted again, my voice shaking as I aimed the rifle at its chest. The creature let out a low, rumbling growl that seemed to vibrate through the air. Its body shifted slightly, the edges of it blurring like smoke. It didn't seem entirely solid, like it was caught between this world and somewhere else. I fired. The sound of the gunshot echoed through the small station, deafening in the confined space. The bullet hit its mark, or at least I thought it did, but the creature didn't even flinch. It just stood there, staring at me with those burning eyes. I fired again and again. Nothing. The bullets passed through it like it wasn't even there, embedding themselves in the wall behind it. My heart sank as I realized the rifle was useless against this thing. The creature took a step forward, its long claws scraping against the wooden floor. Max lunged at it, barking and snapping at its legs, but the creature barely seemed to notice him. It swiped at Max with one massive hand, sending him skidding across the floor with a yelp. "Max," I cried out, my chest tightening as I saw him struggle to get back on his feet. I had no time to think, no time to plan. My eyes darted to the compass in my hand, the only thing that had worked against this thing before. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it was all I had left. The creature lunged toward me with unnatural speed, its claws reaching out like they were going to tear me apart. I raised the compass instinctively, angling it toward the beam of my flashlight still clutched in my other hand. The light hit the compass and reflected directly into the creature's face. It screamed, a horrible ear-piercing sound that made my ears ring and my stomach churn. The glow in its eyes flickered for a moment as it stumbled back, clawing at its face like it was trying to block out the light. I didn't hesitate. Grabbing Max by his collar, I pulled him up and bolted for the door. The creature thrashed behind us, its screams filling the air as I threw open the door and ran into the night. The forest outside was dark and silent again, but I didn't stop running. Max limped beside me, keeping pace as best he could despite his injuries. My flashlight flickered weakly in my hand, but I didn't dare stop to fix it. We ran until we reached the edge of the forest, until we could see the faint glow of headlights from an approaching vehicle on the dirt road leading to the station. It was backup, the other rangers responding to my call for help. I stumbled toward them, waving my arms frantically as they jumped out of their truck. "It's in there," I shouted breathlessly, pointing back toward the station. "It's still in there." They looked at me like I'd lost my mind, like they couldn't believe what they were hearing, but they didn't question me. Guns drawn and flashlights ready, they moved toward the station while another ranger stayed behind to check on Max and me. I sat down on the ground beside Max, my hands shaking as I stroked his fur gently. He whined softly but leaned into me for comfort. "You're okay," I whispered to him, though I wasn't sure if I was trying to reassure him or myself. Minutes passed like hours as we waited for the others to return. Finally, one of them emerged from the trees, his face pale and his flashlight shaking in his hand. "There's nothing in there," he said quietly. "No sign of anything." I stared at him in disbelief. "That's not possible," I said firmly. "It was there. I saw it. You must have missed something." He shook his head slowly. "We checked every inch of that place," he said. "There's nothing." But as he spoke, I noticed something behind him, something moving in the shadows just beyond the tree line. Those eyes, glowing red, watching, waiting. It wasn't over. Not yet. I froze, my eyes locked on those glowing red orbs in the shadows. They weren't close, but they were there. Watching, waiting. My heart started pounding again, and I felt Max tense beside me, his ears pinned back as he let out a low growl. The ranger standing in front of me noticed my expression and turned to look over his shoulder. "What is it?" he asked, his voice steady but cautious. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. I just pointed toward the tree line, my hand shaking. The other rangers turned their flashlights toward the area, but the moment the beams hit the shadows, the eyes disappeared. "It's there," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I saw it." One of the rangers stepped forward cautiously, shining his flashlight into the trees. "There's nothing here," he said after a moment, his tone calm but firm, but I knew better. "It's hiding," I said, my voice trembling. "It doesn't want you to see it." The rangers exchanged uneasy glances before one of them spoke up. "Let's get you back to base," he said gently. You've been through a lot tonight. I wanted to argue, to make them understand that this thing was still out there, but I was too exhausted to fight. My body felt heavy, and my mind was clouded with fear and confusion. All I could do was nod and let them help me to my feet. Max limped beside me as we climbed into the back of their truck. He leaned against me for support, his body warm and reassuring despite everything we'd been through. I stroked his fur absent-mindedly as the truck started moving, my eyes fixed on the forest disappearing behind us. The ride back to base was quiet. The Rangers didn't ask questions. They just let me sit there in silence, staring out the window at the dark woods passing by. Max rested his head on my lap, his breathing slow and steady as he finally started to relax. But I couldn't relax, not yet. When we arrived at the Ranger headquarters, they checked me over for injuries and gave Max some water and food, while a vet was called in to examine him. They were kind, understanding, but I could see it in their eyes. They didn't believe me. They thought I was just another ranger who'd spent too much time alone in the woods, someone whose imagination had gotten the better of him. But I knew what I'd seen, and I knew it wasn't over. Over the next few days, I tried to convince them to investigate further, to search the forest for any signs of the Watcher, but they dismissed my concerns as stress-induced paranoia. They chalked up the broken door and shattered window at Station 3 to a bear attack and moved on like nothing had happened. But hikers started reporting strange things: footprints too large to be human, guttural howls echoing through the trees at night, shadows that seemed to move on their own. Some even claimed to see glowing red eyes watching them from the mist. The reports were always dismissed as exaggerations or misinterpretations of natural phenomena. But I knew better. I became obsessed with finding answers, spending every spare moment researching local legends and old ranger logs for anything that might explain what was happening in those woods. The more I learned about the Watcher, the more convinced I became that it wasn't just a legend, it was real. And it wasn't going away. Every year on the anniversary of that night, I returned to Sequoia National Forest, to the spot where Max and I first encountered the Watcher, and waited. Sometimes there was nothing, just silence and shadows, but other times, I saw them, those eyes. Always watching, always waiting. Most people think of forests as peaceful places, quiet escapes from the chaos of everyday life. But not me, not anymore, because I know what's out there. And if you ever find yourself alone in Sequoia National Forest, if you ever hear a howl that doesn't sound quite right or see footprints that don't belong, if you ever feel like you're being watched, run. Because some things in this world aren't meant to be understood or survived.